The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of red dust, and Nora Hart gripped her carpetbag tighter. Through the window, she could see Elk Fork Station, little more than a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against the September wind. The air carried the sharp scent of pine smoke and horse sweat. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down. She was the last passenger. The others had departed at more civilized stops along the route from Helena. Nora smoothed her traveling dress, a practical brown wool that had seen better days, and prepared herself for what came next. In her bag, wrapped in her mother's old shawl, lay the marriage contract and a silver locket, all that remained of her life in Boston. The station platform was rough planking that creaked under her boots. A few men lounged against the building, watching her with idle curiosity. Mail-order brides weren't uncommon in the territories, but they still drew stares. Nora kept her chin up, though her stomach churned. She'd learned to wear dignity like armor these past 2 years. "Miss Hart?" The voice was deep, measured. She turned to find a man who seemed carved from the mountains themselves. Broad shoulders filled out a worn flannel shirt, and his hands, massive, scarred things, hung quiet at his sides. His face was weathered but not unkind, with gray threading through dark hair that needed cutting. He stood apart from the other men, neither rushing forward nor hanging back. "Mr. McRae?" She kept her voice steady. "Stone," he said. "Folks call me Stone." His eyes, the color of winter sky, studied her with practical assessment. "That all you brought?" "Yes." She'd sold everything else to pay for the journey. He nodded, taking the carpetbag from her hand. His fingers brushed hers, rough as tree bark. "Wagon's this way. We've got a piece to travel before dark." The wagon was sturdy, built for hauling timber. He'd spread a clean blanket over the bench seat. As he helped her up, his grip was careful, as if she might break. Nora wanted to tell him she wasn't China, that she'd kneaded bread until her arms ached and scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. But she kept quiet. They rode in silence at first, the horses' hooves beating steady rhythm on the dirt track. The town fell away quickly, replaced by stands of lodgepole pine and glimpses of mountains that scraped the sky. Stone handled the reins with the same quiet competence he seemed to bring to everything. "Winter comes early here," he said finally. "Got the wood mostly split, but there's work yet. Root cellar needs filling. Stock needs tending." "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Stone." He glanced at her, something like approval in his expression. "Good." The road wound higher, and Nora pulled her shawl closer. She'd need warmer clothes. Everything would need adjusting. Her expectations, her habits, her dreams. In Boston, she'd imagined marriage differently. White lace and organ music. Not a business contract and a silent man who smelled of sawdust and leather. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, the words scraping her throat. "About why I answered your advertisement." Stone's hand stayed steady on the reins. "If it's about what them Boston doctors said, I already know. Your letters were honest." Heat flooded her cheeks. She'd written it plain in her third letter, when his questions had turned serious. "The physician says my womb sits wrong, that I'm built poorly for childbearing. My former fiancé ended our engagement when his family learned of it." "Then why—" "I've seen lightning strike a sound house," Stone said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Seen poorly built shacks stand through storms that leveled better buildings. Doctors know bodies, maybe, but they don't know everything about what makes a family." The wagon rolled on. A hawk circled overhead, riding invisible currents. Nora watched it, trying to parse the meaning in Stone's words. "You want children," she said. It wasn't a question. His advertisement had been clear about that. "I want a home with voices in it besides my own." He shifted on the bench, the movement bringing his thigh briefly against hers. "Want someone to build something with. Children, God willing, but that's not all of it." They created a rise, and Stone pointed ahead. "There." The cabin sat in a meadow backed by forest, solid and unpretentious. Smoke drifted from the chimney. A barn stood to one side, its doors open to reveal neat stalls. Beyond that, she could see a large garden plot, mostly harvested now, and what looked like the beginning of an orchard. "You built this?" "Every board and nail." There was quiet pride in his voice. "Took 3 years to get it right. Another 2 to get the land proved up proper under the Homestead Act." As they drew closer, Nora could see the care in the construction. The windows fitted snug, the porch boards laid true. This was a man who did things once and did them right. Stone pulled the wagon up to the porch and climbed down, then reached up for her. This time, Nora let herself notice the strength in his arms, the careful way he set her on her feet. "I'll show you inside, then see to the horses." He carried her bag up the steps. "Tomorrow we'll go to town, speak to Reverend Pike. He rides circuit, but he's due through Tuesday next. We can make it legal then." Legal, not blessed or celebrated, just legal. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A main room with a cook stove and stone fireplace, a table and 2 chairs, shelves holding a few dishes and preserves. Through one door, she glimpsed a bed covered with a worn quilt. Through another, a smaller room with a narrow cot. "You'll take the bedroom," Stone said. "I'll bunk in here until—" He stopped, color rising above his beard. "Until you're comfortable." It was more consideration than she'd expected. In Boston, her former fiancé had spoken of marriage rights and duties, never of comfort. "Thank you," she said. Stone set her bag by the bedroom door, then stood awkward in his own home. "There's stew keeping warm, bread in the box. I'll be outside if you need anything." After he left, Nora stood in the quiet cabin, breathing in the scents of wood smoke and pine. Through the window, she watched Stone lead the horses to the barn, his movements unhurried and sure. This was her life now, this cabin, this man, this vast silence broken only by wind in the pines. She unpacked slowly, hanging her 2 spare dresses on pegs, placing her mother's Bible on the small table by the bed. When she opened the locket, her mother's face gazed back. Another woman who'd married for necessity and found something deeper in the end. By the time Stone returned, she had bowls on the table and coffee heating. He washed at the basin by the door, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked by old scars. "Smells good," he said. They ate without much talk, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Stone had the stillness of a man used to his own company, but not the sullenness of one who preferred it. When their eyes met across the table, he didn't look away. "About children," Nora said finally, setting down her spoon. "I can't promise—" "I'm not asking for promises about what you can or can't do," Stone interrupted, his voice firm but not harsh. "Bodies do what they will. I'm asking something different." He leaned back in his chair, choosing words with the same care he'd shown fitting those window frames. "When it's time, if it's time, will you try? Will you want them, work for them, raise them up, right? That's what I need to know. Not can you, but will you?" The question hung between them like morning mist. "Will you give me sons?" Not a demand for the impossible, but a request for partnership in hope. Nora thought of the years behind her, the humiliation of medical examinations, the poisonous sympathy of Boston society, the fiancé who'd looked at her like damaged goods. Then she looked at this man who built things to last and spoke of lightning and houses still standing. "Yes," she said, "I will." Stone nodded once, satisfied. "Then we'll make do with whatever comes." Later, as she lay in the narrow bed listening to him moving quietly in the other room, Nora pressed her hand to her belly. Tomorrow would bring town gossips and legal papers, winter preparations, and the learning of each other's ways. But tonight, in this cabin built by careful hands, she'd found something she hadn't expected. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. A man who asked not what she could give, but what she would try to build. Through the thin wall, she heard Stone banking the fire for the night, making the cabin safe and warm against the mountain cold. Outside, the wind sang through the pines, carrying the promise of snow and the scent of wild places. Nora closed her eyes and, for the first time in 2 years, slept without dreams of all she'd lost. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, with frost silvering the grass outside the cabin. Nora had been up since before dawn, pressing her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out her eyes, and trying to calm the flutter in her stomach. Through the window, she could see Stone splitting wood, each swing of the axe precise and powerful. They'd spent 3 days learning each other's rhythms. She'd discovered he took his coffee black and bitter, that he hummed tunelessly while working, that he always checked the animals last thing before bed. He'd learned she needed bread like she was fighting it, that she couldn't abide a dirty dish left overnight, that she sang hymns under her breath when nervous. Now Stone appeared in the doorway, dressed in what must be his Sunday best, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair slicked back with water. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "Wagon's ready," he said, then paused. "You look fine, Nora." It wasn't poetry, but something in his eyes made her cheeks warm. "Thank you." The ride to town took 2 hours through country that made her breath catch. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks already white with early snow. Stone pointed out landmarks: Eagle's Nest Rock, where golden eagles raise their young; Baker's Creek, named for a man who drowned trying to pan gold; the lightning-struck pine that marked the halfway point. Elk Fork's Main Street was busy for a Tuesday. Word had spread, as word always did in small towns. Nora kept her eyes forward as the Stone helped her down from the wagon, though she felt the weight of curious stares. The church was hardly more than a large cabin with a cross nailed over the door. Inside, it smelled of pine sap and beeswax. Reverend Pike stood at the altar, a traveling preacher with kind eyes and clothes that had seen too many miles. Stone, Miss Hart. He shook their hands warmly. "I understand you're in need of my services." A small group had gathered, witnesses drawn by curiosity or friendship. Nora recognized the storekeeper and his wife from their supply run. A weathered woman with gray-streaked hair introduced herself as Elodie Beaulieu, the local midwife. "Métis," she said, studying Nora with sharp dark eyes. "My grandmother taught me the old ways and the new. You come see me when you need." The implication made Nora's throat tight, but she managed to nod. "If we're all here," Reverend Pike said, opening his worn Bible, "let's begin." The ceremony was simple. Stone had no ring, they weren't common in the territories, but he'd carved 2 bands from a piece of pale pine, smooth and light on their fingers. When it came time for vows, he spoke as clear and steady. "I promise not to abandon, not to silence, not to raise my hand in anger." The words weren't traditional, but they carried weight. "I promise to provide, protect, and respect. To build with you, not over you." Nora's voice shook only a little as she repeated the words, then added her own. "I promise to work beside you, to speak truth even when it's hard, to make this house a home, to try, always to try." Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Montana and the Lord above, Reverend Pike said, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Stone's kiss was brief, careful, a seal on a contract more than a declaration of passion. But his hand was warm and steady at her back as they turned to face the witnesses. The general store had been transformed for the occasion. Mrs. Henderson, the storekeeper's wife, had laid out a simple spread: cold meats, fresh bread, preserved fruits, and a cake that must have taken precious sugar. The gesture touched Nora more than any Boston society wedding breakfast. "Welcome to Elk Fork," Mrs. Henderson said, pressing Nora's hand. "It's good to see Stone taking a wife. That cabin needs a woman's touch." Others offered similar sentiments. Tom Pike, no relation to the Reverend, pumped Stone's hand and told Nora she'd married the most reliable man in the valley. "Need help come harvest or building time, Stone's your man. Never asks for help himself, though." He winked at Nora. "Maybe you can change that." Dr. O'Rourke arrived late, medical bag in hand. He was younger than Nora expected, with red hair and an Irish lilt to his voice. "Forgive me," he said. "Mrs. Larson's baby decided today was the day. Mother and child doing well." He smiled at Nora. "I ride circuit like the Reverend, but I'm through every month. You need anything, send word." As the afternoon wore on, Nora began to see the shape of their community. These people looked after each other, shared news and resources, celebrated small joys together. It wasn't Boston society, but it had its own warmth. Stone stayed close, but not hovering, introducing her to neighbors, making sure she had food and drink. Once, when Marshal Brady told a long story about catching cattle thieves, Stone's hand briefly touched the small of her back, a quiet check that she was all right. "He's a good man," Elodie said, appearing at Nora's elbow. "Came here 5 years ago, kept to himself mostly, built that cabin board by board. We wondered if he'd ever take a wife." "What changed?" Nora asked. Elodie's dark eyes were knowing. Man gets tired of empty rooms, gets to thinking about what lasts longer than himself. She patted Nora's arm. You need anything, woman things, baby things. You come see me. I don't judge, and I don't gossip. The sun was slanting low when Stone finally said they should head back. Nora's face hurt from smiling, and her feet ached in her good boots, but something warm had settled in her chest. They rode home in comfortable quiet, the wagon loaded with wedding gifts, preserves from Mrs. Henderson, a knitted blanket from the minister's wife, seed packets for next year's garden. The mountains glowed gold and purple in the setting sun. That was kind of them, Nora said. The breakfast and all. Good people here. Stone guided the horses around a rough patch. They'll leave us be mostly, but they'll come if called. Back at the cabin, their cabin now, Stone tended the horses while Nora unpacked the gifts. She'd started supper when he came in, bringing the scent of hay and leather. About sleeping arrangements, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. I meant what I said. You take the bedroom until you're comfortable otherwise. No expectations. Nora turned from the stove. In the lamplight, she could see uncertainty in his weathered face. This man who could fell trees and build houses, but struggled with the delicacy of new marriage. I appreciate that, she said softly. But Stone, we're married now. Properly married. I'm not some fragile city flower. His eyes met hers then, something flickering in their depths. Never thought you were, but being married and being ready, those can be different things. I've waited this long. I can wait until it's right. They worked out the practicalities over supper. She'd take the bedroom for now, but they'd share the main room in the evenings. Chores would be divided. He'd handle the heavy work and hunting. She'd manage the house and garden. Come spring, they'd expand the vegetable plot. Come winter, they'd work on indoor projects together. I can teach you to shoot, Stone offered. Country like this, you should know how. I'd like that. Nora had never held a gun, but here it seemed as necessary as knowing how to bake bread. They established a routine that first evening. Stone carved by the fire. He was making something, though he wouldn't say what, while Nora mended one of his shirts. The silence wasn't empty, but full of small sounds. The pop of burning pine, the whisper of thread through fabric, the soft scrape of knife on wood. Tell me about your family, Nora said eventually. Stone's hands stilled. Father was a farmer in Ohio. Mother died when I was 12. 3 brothers, all younger. Lost 2 in the war. I'm sorry. He resumed carving. Long time ago now. What about yours? Father was a baker in Boston. Mother helped in the shop until she took sick. No siblings. She tied off a stitch. Father died 2 years ago. The shop went to pay debts. That when you got engaged? Nora nodded. Edmund's family owned the building. It seemed like Providence at the time. She laughed. But it had no humor. Until the doctor's examination, they insisted on... Stone's knife paused again. Their loss. The simple words, said so matter-of-factly, eased something that had been tight in her chest for months. Later, as they prepared for bed, Stone showed her things she needed to know. How to bank the fire safely, where he kept the rifle, how to bar the door properly. Bears don't usually come this close, but sometimes a young one gets curious. Make noise, they'll usually run. If not... He showed her how to load and aim. It was full dark when Nora finally retreated to the bedroom. Through the thin door, she could hear Stone settling onto his cot, the creak of rope supports as he found a comfortable position. Her husband. The words still felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, brushing out her hair. In Boston, she'd imagined her wedding night differently, nervous but eager, with a man who loved her. Instead, she was here with a practical stranger who asked for effort, not ability, who offered respect before passion. Maybe it was better this way. Cleaner, clearer. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Nora, forgot to mention, I'm usually up before dawn. Try not to wake you. I'm used to early rising, she called back. Good. And Nora, you did well today. With the people and all, they liked you. Warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, Stone. Sleep well. She heard him move away, heard the cot creak again. Outside, an owl called, lonely in the darkness. But inside the cabin Stone had built, wrapped in wedding gift blankets and the strange comfort of new belonging. Nora McRae now, closed her eyes and slept. The first snow came early that year, drifting down like flour through a sieve while Nora struggled with the temperamental wood stove. She'd burned 3 batches of bread that morning, and the cabin reeked of char and disappointment. Different than a Boston oven, Stone observed from the doorway, not unkindly. Nora blew a strand of hair from her face, leaving a streak of flour across her forehead. Everything's different here. He moved to the stove, adjusting the damper with practiced ease. Fire needs more air when you're baking. This iron holds heat different than brick. Here. He showed her how to test the temperature with a sprinkle of flour, how to rotate the pans for even browning. 2 weeks married, and they were still learning the dance of shared space. Stone could move through the cabin silent as smoke, appearing suddenly to add wood to the fire or pump fresh water. Nora had learned to announce herself with small sounds, humming, rattling pans, to avoid startling him. "Try again," he said. "I'll watch." It was the longest he'd stayed inside during daylight hours. Usually, he disappeared after breakfast to split wood, tend stock, or work on mysterious projects in the barn. Now he settled at the table, carving what looked like a chair leg, while Nora mixed new dough. This time, with his quiet guidance, the bread rose golden and perfect. The smell filled the cabin like a blessing. "My mother used to bake on Saturdays," Stone said suddenly. Whole house smelled like heaven. It was the most he'd volunteered about his past. Nora sliced the warm bread, spread it with butter they'd churned together that morning, and set it before him. His eyes closed briefly as he tasted it. "Just like I remember." That afternoon, he taught her to read the weather. They stood on the porch, watching clouds mass over the peaks. "See how they're moving? Like water boiling backward." He pointed to the shifting patterns. "Storm coming, maybe tonight. The mountains talk if you know how to listen." "What do they say?" "Right now, they're saying we need more wood inside." He smiled slightly, a rare thing that transformed his stern features. "And the shutters need securing." They worked together, stone splitting while Nora stacked. Her hands, already rough from years of work, developed new calluses. When a splinter drove deep into her palm, Stone took her hand without asking, extracted it with gentle precision. "You're not what I expected," he said, still holding her hand. "What did you expect?" "Someone softer, city-bred all the way through." He traced a callus with his thumb. "But you've got working hands." "My father believed in honest labor, even for daughters." She didn't pull away from his touch. "What else do the mountains say?" He looked up at the darkening sky. "That winter's coming hard this year. We'll be snowed in for weeks at a time." The prospect might have frightened her once. Now, looking at this man who handled her small hurts with such care, she felt only a flutter of anticipation. That night, the storm hit with fierce beauty. Wind howled around the cabin corners, and snow drove against the windows like flung rice. They ate stew by lamplight. The world shrunk to this one warm room. "I started something for you," Stone said when the dishes were done. He retrieved a bundle from the corner, carved wood pieces that assembled into a rocking chair frame. "Need sanding and finishing, but I thought women like rocking chairs." Nora ran her hands over the smooth wood, touched by the hours of work it represented. "It's beautiful. When did you—" "Evenings, mostly. In the barn." He looked embarrassed. "Wanted you to have something that was yours." She thought of the bare cabin, his sparse belongings, how he'd given her the bedroom without question. This man who owned so little, making sure she had something of her own. "Thank you," she whispered. They worked on it together as the storm raged. Stone showed her how to sand with the grain, how to rub oil into the wood until it glowed. Their hands brushed often in the lamplight. Once, when she leaned close to examine a joint, she felt his breath stir her hair. "You smell like bread and wood smoke," he said softly. "Is that good?" "It's home." The word hung between them, weighted with possibility. Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. Over the following days, the boundaries between them softened like snow in sun. Stone began teaching her skills she'd need: how to mend harness, how to tell good hay from bad, how to doctor simple injuries in stock. In return, she taught him her mother's trick for stretching flour with potato, how to make soap that didn't crack skin raw, how to darn socks so the men didn't rub blisters. "Never had anyone to teach me the small comforts," he admitted one evening, examining his newly mended sock with wonder. They developed a nightly ritual. After supper, Nora would work on what she'd started calling her marriage quilt, piecing together scraps from her old life and new fabric bought in town. Stone would carve or mend tack, the lamp between them creating a circle of gold in the darkness. "What's that pattern called?" he asked one night. "Wedding ring. See how the circles interconnect?" She spread the fabric to show him. "My grandmother made one, said it represented how lives loop together, no beginning or end." Stone traced one of the circles with a finger. "Like a promise?" "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, I was engaged once, before the war." Nora's needle stilled. She waited. "Sarah, judge's daughter, pretty as a picture and knew it." His knife moved steady on the wood. "When I enlisted, she promised to wait, sent letters for a while, then they stopped coming." "What happened?" "Came home to find her married to a banker. Said she couldn't tie herself to a man who might come back changed. Or not come back at all." He examined his carving. A wooden flower, delicate as the real thing. "Can't say I blamed her. I did come back changed." Nora chose her words carefully. "We're all changed by what we survive. Doesn't make us less worthy of love." His eyes met hers across the lamplight. "That why you really left Boston? Not just the broken engagement?" She'd been waiting for this question. "People talk, especially about women who are imperfect. Every social call, every church service, every shopping trip, whispers followed. Poor Nora, barren Nora. What man would want her now?" The needle shook in her hand. "I couldn't breathe there anymore." "Their loss," Stone said, echoing his wedding day words. But this time he reached across the space between them, covered her hand with his. "Our gain." That night, when they parted for bed, he lingered at her door. "Nora, you're not imperfect, you're just human, like the rest of us." She lay awake long after, listening to the wind and thinking about circles with no beginning or end, about promises made in deed rather than word. The next morning brought sun on snow, blinding bright. Stone was already up, coffee made, fire crackling. But instead of heading out after breakfast, he stayed. "Thought we might work on your shooting," he said. "Snow's good for tracking where bullets hit." He'd set up targets, tin cans on fence posts. The rifle was heavy in Nora's arms, but Stone showed her how to brace it proper, how to sight down the barrel. "Breathe out slow, squeeze gentle," he murmured, standing close behind her. "Like you're asking, not demanding." The first shot went wide, the second closer. By the third, she clipped the can, sending it spinning. "Natural eye for it," Stone said, approval warm in his voice. They practiced until her shoulder ached and her ears rang. But she could hit more often than not, and Stone's rare smile made the discomfort worthwhile. Walking back to the cabin, he suddenly stopped. "Listen." Nora held her breath. At first, nothing. Then, a subtle whisper, like silk on silk. "Snow talking," Stone said. "Means more coming. Different than storm snow. This'll be the kind that closes roads, keeps folks home for weeks. Are we ready?" He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Wood stacked, larders full, stocks sheltered. Question is, are you ready? Being snowed in. It's close quarters, no escaping each other." Nora thought of 2 weeks of lamplight evenings, shared work, small kindnesses, of a man who carved beauty from rough wood and spoke of circles without end. "I'm ready," she said. That evening, as predicted, the snow began, soft, steady, inexorable. They prepared together, bringing in extra wood, checking windows, ensuring the animals were secure. Working as a team now, no wasted motion. When all was done, they stood at the window watching the world disappear in white. "Could be weeks before we see town," Stone said. "I know." He turned to her, and she saw her own anticipation reflected in his eyes. Whatever came next, they would weather it together. In the circle of lamplight, with her marriage quilt growing beneath her hands, and this good man learning the shape of contentment beside her, Nora felt the first stirrings of something that might, given time and patience, grow into love. The snow fell. soft as promises, sealing them into their small world of wood smoke and warmth. And for the first time since leaving Boston, Nora was exactly where she wanted to be. The ladder to the barn loft creaked under Nora's weight. She'd come searching for burlap to protect her winter vegetables. But Stone had been distracted when she'd asked where he kept it, his eyes sliding away from hers. Up in the loft, maybe, he'd said vaguely. Haven't been up there in a spell. Now, pushing through the hay-scented dimness, she understood why. Weak afternoon light filtered through cracks in the boards, illuminating dust motes and something else. A wooden box tucked far under the eaves. She shouldn't look. It wasn't her place to dig into whatever Stone had chosen to hide. But her hand moved without permission, drawn by the same instinct that had brought her west seeking a new life. The box was pine, smooth with handling. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, a medal on faded ribbon, letters tied with string, and beneath those, folded papers covered in pencil sketches. Her breath caught as she recognized what the drawings showed. A cradle, drawn from every angle, measurements carefully noted, details of spindle design, different styles of rockers. In the corner of one page, a date, December 1863. "Nora?" she startled, nearly dropping the box. Stone stood at the top of the ladder, his face unreadable in the dim light. "I'm sorry," she began. "I was looking for burlap." "It's all right." He climbed the rest of the way up, settling beside her in the hay. For a long moment, he stared at the box in her lap. Should have put that away better, or burned it, maybe. These drawings, made them in winter camp, 63. Thought I'd be home by spring, thought Sarah would. He trailed off, picked up the medal. Shiloh. They gave these out like candy after. Didn't much matter to the boys who didn't come home. Nora carefully unfolded one of the letters. The paper was worn soft at the creases, as if it had been read many times. Sarah's handwriting was flowery, full of gossip about dress patterns and social calls. Nothing about missing him. Nothing about love. She never wrote about the future, Stone said quietly. Should have seen it then. But when you're young and far from home, you see what you need to see. At the bottom of the box lay another letter, this one in Stone's careful hand. The ink had never been blotted. The letter never sent. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "The baby clothes you sent found good use. Gave them to a Tennessee woman who lost everything when the armies came through. She cried like I haven't seen since Ma died. Said I should save them for our own children, but I told her you'd understand. You always were generous." "She sent baby clothes?" Nora asked softly. "Her cousin's cast-offs. Said she was practicing for when we'd need them." His laugh was bitter. Found out later she was already seeing the banker then. The clothes were likely her way of easing guilt. Nora refolded the letter carefully. "You kept building cradle plans even after—" "Fool's hope. Thought if I could just make it perfect enough, detailed enough." He shrugged. "Man needs something to dream on when he's cold and scared and far from anything good." She studied the sketches again. Such care in every line, such tenderness in the carved details he'd imagined. A man planning beauty in the midst of war's ugliness. "You could still build it," she said. "The design is lovely." His hand covered hers on the paper. "Started to, that first year here. Got as far as cutting the wood before I realized how empty this place would echo with a cradle and no child." He squeezed gently. "It's out back of the barn. Good pine, going to waste." They sat in silence, the weight of old grief heavy between them. Through the loft window, Nora could see snow beginning to fall again, soft and steady. "I was so sure the doctors were wrong," she said finally. "After Edmund broke our engagement, I saw 3 more physicians. Each one said the same thing. My womb sits wrong, tilted back. One said it was like trying to plant seeds on a hillside. Everything would just slide away." Stone's thumb traced circles on her wrist. "Doctors say a lot of things." "But what if they're right? What if you've tied yourself to another woman who can't give you children?" He turned to face her fully then, his gray eyes intense. "You think that's all I want? A brood mare?" The crude term made her flinch. "No, but I want a partner, Nora. Someone to build a life with. Children are part of that hope, yes, but not the whole of it." He touched her face, his calloused palm gentle against her cheek. "You think I'd trade what we're building for a guarantee of sons? Trade these evenings by the fire, you teaching me patience, me teaching you strength. Tears burned her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. His thumb caught a tear as it fell. Know you work until your hands bleed but never complain. Know you sing when you think I can't hear, hymns when you're worried, folk songs when you're content. Know you gave names to all the chickens even though I told you not to get attached. Despite everything, she laughed. Henrietta's the red one. I know. His smile was tender. I know you flinch when anyone mentions babies, but force yourself to smile anyway. Know you're stronger than you believe and kinder than this hard country deserves. The space between them had shrunk to nothing. Nora could smell the pine sap on his clothes, the coffee on his breath. This close, she could see silver threading through the hair at his temples, the lines that pain and weather had carved beside his eyes. Stone, she whispered. Ask me, he said. Whatever you're thinking, ask, when will we truly be husband and wife? His hand was still on her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. When you say, when you're ready to try for whatever comes, children or no children, when you believe that you're enough, just as you are. She thought of the cradle plans, drawn by lamplight in an army camp, of baby clothes sent by a faithless woman, given away in kindness, of a man who'd carved beauty from loss and offered her not just a house, but a home. What if I'm ready now? His eyes darkened. Nora. She silenced him with a kiss, tentative at first, then deeper as he responded. His arms came around her, solid and sure, and she felt safe in a way she hadn't since her father died. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, hay in her hair and wonder in his eyes, she knew something fundamental had shifted. Not in the hayloft, he said roughly. You deserve better than that. They climbed down together, Stone going first to steady the ladder. In the barn's main floor, he stopped, moving to a corner she hadn't explored. Under a canvas tarp lay wood. Pine, as he'd said, already cut and shaped into cradle pieces. Could finish it, he said quietly. Together. Even if we never need it, would be good to see it whole. Nora ran her hand over the smooth wood, imagining the hours he'd already put into it. Yes. They walked back to the cabin through falling snow, hand in hand now, no pretense left between them. Inside, Stone built up the fire while Nora made coffee, both needing the familiar ritual to steady themselves. I should tell you, Stone said as they settled by the fire. I've not been with a woman since before the war. Sarah and I never. She wanted to wait, and after, it didn't seem. Nora felt relief wash through her. I've never. Edmund kissed me twice, very properly. That's all. Then we'll learn together. He took her hand, kissed each finger. No hurry, no expectations except kindness. That night, when it came time for bed, Nora didn't go to her room. Instead, she stood in the doorway of their bedroom, heart hammering. You're sure? Stone asked. I'm sure I want to try. I'm sure I want to build something with you. Family, home, future. Whatever shape it takes. He held out his hand, and she took it. Later, in the darkness with snow whispering against the windows, they lay entwined in the bed Stone had built for the family he dreamed of. It had been awkward and sweet, careful and passionate by turns. Not the stuff of romance novels, but real in theirs. No regrets? Stone asked, his voice rumbling against her ear where she lay on his chest. None. She traced the scar on his shoulder, a battlefield souvenir he'd earned at Shiloh. Do you think, could we be blessed? Despite what the doctors said. Don't know. He pulled her closer. But I know we're blessed already. This moment, this choice, that's blessing enough for now. Through the window, she could see stars between the clouds, bright and cold as promises. In the morning, they would wake to chores and breakfast, to the rhythm of shared days. They would work on the cradle together, a hope made manifest in wood and will. But for now, in the warm darkness of their marriage bed, Nora let herself believe in possibilities, in seeds that might take root despite the angle of the ground, in love that grew from partnership rather than passion, in the family they would make whether children came or not. The box in the loft with its freight of old dreams could stay where it was. They were writing a new story now, one careful line at a time, like pencil sketches of something beautiful still taking shape. The nausea came with the first hard freeze of November, turning Nora's stomach as she tried to fry eggs for breakfast. She barely made it to the porch before losing last night's supper, gripping the rail while Stone held her hair back. "Just something I ate," she gasped, though they'd shared the same meal. Stone said nothing, but his hand was gentle on her back, his eyes thoughtful as he helped her inside. It happened again the next morning, and the next. By the fourth day, Stone set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "When was your last monthly time?" Heat flooded her face. They'd been truly married for 6 weeks now, but some topics still felt too intimate for breakfast conversation. I'm not always regular." "Nora," she counted back, fingers worrying the tablecloth. "September, before I came here, but that doesn't mean, the doctors said." Doctors can be wrong. Hope and terror warred in her chest. She'd let herself dream, those nights in Stone's arms, but dreams and reality were different creatures. It could be the change in climate, or worry, or... Stone reached across the table, stilled her restless hands. "Elodie would know. She's helped birth half the babies in the valley. I can't. What if she examines me and says what all the others said?" The words came out cracked. "I couldn't bear it, not again." "Then we wait. See what comes." He squeezed gently. "But Nora, maybe start hoping instead of fearing." Winter closed around them like a fist. Snow fell for days at a time, isolating them from town, from neighbors, from anything beyond their small circle of warmth. Stone worked on the cradle in the evenings now, not hiding it anymore. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper became a kind of prayer. Nora fought the nausea each morning, hid her dizziness as she went about her chores. But her body betrayed her in other ways. Tender breasts, bone-deep exhaustion, the way certain smells made her stomach revolt. Stone watched it all, saying nothing, but his touch grew even gentler, his care more pronounced. "I should check the trap line," he said one morning after a 3-day blizzard. "In this weather, meat's running low, won't go far." But she saw the worry in his eyes, the way he'd started watching her like she might shatter. After he left, she pulled out the worn medical book Elodie had lent her months ago, reading the chapter on pregnancy for the 10th time. Everything matched, but she'd had symptoms before, stress and hope playing tricks on her body. She was bent over the book when warmth flooded between her legs. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then the cramping started, low and familiar, and she knew. By the time Stone returned, she'd cleaned herself up, changed clothes, buried the evidence deep in the washing. She was peeling potatoes for supper, hands steady through sheer will. "Catch anything?" Her voice sounded normal. "Good. 2 rabbits." He hung his coat, crossed to warm himself by the fire. "You all right? You look pale." "Just tired. Long winter already." He studied her, and she saw the moment he noticed, the way she held herself too carefully, the shadows under her eyes. But he didn't push, just took the knife from her hands. "Rest. I'll finish supper." That night she turned away when he reached for her in bed. "I'm not feeling well." His hand found hers in the darkness, held it without demanding more. "I know." The words hung between them. Nora squeezed her eyes shut, but tears leaked out anyway. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not being what you need, what we need. I hoped." "Shh." He pulled her back against his chest, careful of her sore body. "Nothing to apologize for. But the cradle is just wood-shaped pretty. Doesn't mean anything without the love that fills it." His breath stirred her hair. And love comes in many forms. They lay quiet while wind howled outside. Finally, Nora spoke into the darkness. "It wasn't real, just late, but for a few weeks, I let myself believe. Then we'll believe again, as many times as it takes." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "Or we'll find another way. Tom Pike mentioned the other day that the mining camp has orphans sometimes. Parents die of fever or accident, children left with no one. You'd do that? Take in another's child? Would you?" She thought of the cradle growing more beautiful each night, of the empty room waiting to be filled, of all the love they had with nowhere to put it. Yes. Winter deepened. They developed new rhythms, Stone reading aloud while Nora sewed, teaching each other card games, working puzzles Tom Pike's wife had sent. The cradle neared completion, each spindle perfect, the headboard carved with wild roses like the ones that would bloom come spring. On clear nights, they bundled in quilts on the porch, watching stars wheel overhead while Stone pointed out constellations. "That's Orion, the hunter. See his belt? I see a man with very loose trousers." His laugh rumbled through her. "City girl, mountain man. You're mountain man." The possessive made her heart skip. Yes, January brought a brief thaw, then February slammed down harder than before. They were down to salt pork and stored vegetables when Stone announced he had to attempt the trip to town. "We need supplies. Medicine, too, in case she caught again. In case this time was real." Neither said it aloud. He was gone 3 days. 3 days where Nora paced and prayed and tried not to imagine him frozen in a drift somewhere. When he finally returned, he brought more than supplies. "Letter from Boston," he said, handing her the envelope. Her mother's cousin, writing that Edmund had married a railroad heiress. "She's already expecting," the letter reported with thoughtless cruelty. "Such a blessing for a first year of marriage." Nora set the letter in the fire, watched it curl to ash. "Good for them." "You mean that?" she considered. "Yes, he wanted children more than he wanted me. Now he has what he wanted, and I have what I didn't know I needed." "What's that?" "A man who wants me more than he wants children. Who'll carve a cradle just for hope but doesn't need it filled to be happy." Stone pulled her onto his lap, something he'd started doing these winter evenings. "Not happy because it's empty. Happy because we're here to fill it, or not fill it, together." March arrived with the sound of ice breaking in the creek. The road to town opened intermittently. Nora's monthly courses came regular as sorrow, but the grief grew lighter each time, shared between two instead of carried alone. "Elodie asked after you," Stone said after a trip to town. "Said you're welcome any time, not just for medical things. She teaches young wives things, herbs and such." Nora knew what he wasn't saying. Herbs that might help, positions that might encourage conception, old wisdom that doctors dismissed. "Maybe when the road's clear proper." "No hurry, we've got time." Time. Such a luxury after years of feeling it slip away. She was 27 now, Stone 40. Not young, but not yet old. Time to try, time to fail, time to find another way if needed. The cradle was finished now, rubbed with oil until it gleamed. They set it in the empty room, where morning light would fall across it come summer. "It's beautiful," Nora said. "Empty beauty. No, hopeful beauty. There's a difference." That night, as they lay together with spring's first rain pattering on the roof, Nora told him about the bleeding, the cramping, the grief she'd carried alone through winter's depth. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "I was ashamed, like my body had played a cruel joke, like I'd failed again." He rolled to face her, cupped her face in the darkness. "You could never fail me, never. We're in this together, the hope and the hurt, both." "I love you," she said, the words coming sudden and sure. "I should have said it sooner." "I love you too. Have for a while now." His thumb traced her lips. "Loved you when you named the chickens. Loved you when you burned 3 loaves learning the stove. Loved you when you cried over that letter and when you stood up after." They made love then with tenderness born of shared sorrow and stubborn hope. Outside, the rain washed winter away, promising green things, growing things, life returning to the valley. Later, drowsing in his arms, Nora thought about seeds and soil, about angles of planting and mysterious ways of growth. Maybe the doctors were right. Maybe her body would never carry life. But here in this bed, in this cabin, in this marriage built on truth and trying, she was already growing something precious. Not a child, not yet, maybe never, but a love that could weather any season, a home that would shelter whatever family they chose or chanced to make. The cradle waited in the empty room, carved with roses that would bloom again and again, no matter what else might fail. And that, Nora thought as sleep claimed her, was its own kind of miracle, its own stubborn proof of spring. The letter arrived with the spring mud when the roads were barely passable and Nora's hands were deep in bread dough. Stone brought it in from town along with salt and coffee, his face troubled. "Boston postmark. he said, setting it on the table like something that might bite. Nora wiped her hands slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. Her mother's cousin had already written about Edmund's marriage. What more could Boston want with her? The handwriting was Edmund's, still precise, still confident. She read it once, then again, unable to quite grasp the words. "What is it?" Stone asked. "He's coming here." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Edmund, his wife died in childbirth, the baby too. He says—" She had to swallow hard. "He says he made a mistake, that the doctors have new treatments now, new understanding. He wants to bring me back to Boston." Stone went very still. "What do you want?" "I want him to have stayed in Boston where he belongs." She set the letter aside with shaking hands. "I want to finish my bread and feed my chickens and work in my garden with my husband. That's what I want." But Edmund had never been one to accept what others wanted when it conflicted with his plans. He arrived 3 weeks later on the morning stage, looking like what he was, a man of means grieving a loss but already planning his next move. His suit was city-cut, his boots polished despite the muddy streets. Besides Stone's weathered solidness, he looked almost fragile. "Nora." He removed his hat, revealed hair already thinning though he was barely 30. "You look well." "I am well." She stood on her own porch, Stone silent beside her. "I'm sorry for your loss, Edmund, truly, but you shouldn't have come." "I had to—" He glanced at Stone, dismissed him with the casual arrogance of a man used to getting his way. "We need to talk, privately. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my husband." Edmund's mouth tightened. "Very well. I've spoken with new physicians in Boston. European trained, they have techniques, massage therapy, positioning treatments. Many women previously thought barren have conceived. I can give you the best care, the best chance, the best cage." The words came out harder than she intended. "That's what you're offering? The same cage I fled. That's unfair. I loved you. You loved the idea of me. Young, grateful, moldable." She felt Stone shift beside her, a subtle movement of support. "When I proved imperfect, you discarded me like a broken toy. Now that your perfect wife is gone, you want your old toy back." Color flooded Edmund's face. "You're being melodramatic. I'm offering you civilization, comfort, medical advancement. I have what I need." She reached for Stone's hand, felt his fingers close around hers, warm and steady. "I have a home I've helped build. A husband who values me beyond my ability to breed. A community that judges me by my work, not my womb." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. This wilderness, this man. What can he offer you? A cabin? Hard labor? Isolation?" Stone spoke for the first time. "Respect." The single word hung in the air like a challenge. Edmund turned to him fully, seeming to truly see him for the first time. "And when she proves barren, when year after year passes with no children, what then, Mr. McRae? Will your respect be enough?" "It's enough now," Stone said simply. "Will be enough then." Edmund laughed, ugly and disbelieving. "Noble words. Let's see how they hold up to reality." He turned back to Nora. "I'll be staying at the hotel in town for a week. When you come to your senses—" "I won't." "We'll see." But Edmund had learned new tactics in Boston. The next day, he appeared at the general store when Nora was shopping, pressing his case with quiet persistence. He attended Sunday service, sitting where she couldn't avoid seeing him, his presence a constant reminder of the life she'd left behind. "Folks are talking," Mrs. Henderson said, not unkindly, as she measured out flour. "That gentleman from Boston says he's here on business, but everyone knows." "Knows what?" The older woman's face softened. "That he's here for you, dear, that there's history." Nora felt the weight of eyes on her as she left the store. In Boston, gossip had been poison. Here, it felt different, concerned rather than cruel, but still heavy. Stone was cleaning his rifle when she got home, movements careful and precise. "Edmund's staying the full week," she said. "I know." He didn't look up from his work. "Tom Pike told me. Also told me Edmund's been asking questions. About our marriage, about children. Stone, do you ever wonder?" Now he did look up, and she saw the fear he'd been hiding. "If you'd stayed in Boston, seen those European doctors?" "No." She crossed to him, took the rifle from his hands, set it aside. I wonder about many things. Whether we'll have children, whether the wheat will grow, whether I'll ever get the stove temperature exactly right. But I never wonder if I chose correctly." He pulled her onto his lap, buried his face in her hair. "He could give you so much. He could give me things. You give me partnership. There's a difference." That night she showed him the difference in their bed, loved him with a fierce tenderness that left them both breathless. But she felt the shadow Edmund had cast, the questions he'd planted like weeds in good soil. The next morning brought worse news. A man in a city suit had been at the land office, asking about homestead claims, about proving up requirements, about what might invalidate a claim. "He's looking for leverage," Stone said grimly. "Something to force your hand. Can he find any?" "Don't know. I've met all the requirements, but law's a tricky thing. City lawyers know ways to twist it that honest folks don't expect." They were still discussing it when horses sounded in the yard. Not one or two, many. Stone reached for his rifle, but Nora recognized the lead rider. "It's Marshal Brady," she said. "And he's not alone." The marshal had brought 2 deputies and a thin man with ink-stained fingers who looked like a clerk. Edmund rode with them, triumph poorly hidden on his face. "Stone," the marshal said, dismounting. "Sorry about this. Got papers from the territorial court. Someone's filed a challenge to your homestead claim." Stone took the papers, read them with growing stillness. "Says here I abandoned the land for 6 months in 81. That's when you helped me track those rustlers," Tom Pike said, riding up fast. He must have seen the group pass and followed. "You were deputized, serving the law." "Should have filed papers," the clerk said primly. "Temporary absence for civic duty requires documentation." "Since when?" Stone's voice was dangerously quiet. "Since always," Edmund said smoothly. "The law is clear. Abandonment voids the claim. However," he let the word hang, "I might be willing to purchase the land. At a fair price. Enough for you and Nora to start fresh somewhere. Boston, perhaps." Nora saw it all then. The plan, the trap, the cruelty of using their own honesty against them. Stone had served when asked, helped bring law to lawless places, and now that very service might cost them everything. "How long do we have?" she asked the marshal. "Hearing's set for next week. You can present evidence, witnesses." He looked genuinely sorry. "It's a technical matter, but technical matters could destroy lives as surely as bullets." After they left, Edmund's parting smile poisoned sweet. Nora and Stone sat at their table, the papers between them like a wall. "We'll fight," she said. "With what?" "He's right about the law. I didn't file papers because I didn't know to file papers. None of us did. Then we'll find another way." She grabbed paper, pen. "I'll write to everyone you helped that season, get testimonies. Show that you were serving the territory, not abandoning it." "Nora!" "No!" She slammed her hand on the table, surprising them both. "I will not let him win. Not Edmund. Not any man who thinks money and manipulation trump honest work. We built this, we proved this land with sweat and hope and—" Her voice broke. "And I will not let him take it." Stone covered her hand with his. "Together?" "Always together." They had a week. 7 days to gather proof that service to community mattered more than paperwork. 7 days to save their home. Nora wrote letters until her fingers cramped. Stone rode to neighboring homesteads, gathering support. Tom Pike sent word to every man who'd ridden with them that season. Mrs. Henderson organized the church women to testify about Stone's character. But Edmund had money, and lawyers versed in territorial law. He had documentation and precedent. He had everything except the one thing that mattered: the truth of what home meant to those who built it board by board, season by season, promise by promise. "Whatever happens," Stone said the night before the hearing, holding her close in their bed, "I want you to know, this time with you has been worth everything. If we lose the land but keep each other, we won't lose," Nora said fiercely. "We can't." But in the darkness, listening to his heartbeat, she wondered if love and determination would be enough against law twisted to serve wealth. If their wild roses would bloom for other hands, if their empty cradle would wait in someone else's home. The hearing would tell. Tomorrow, in a small courtroom in Elk Fork, they would learn if building a life mattered more than following rules they'd never known existed. if service trumped technicality, if love could stand against law. Tonight, though, they had this, each other, their bed, their home still theirs for one more dawn. It would have to be enough. It was everything. The courthouse in Elk Fork was packed to the walls. Word had spread like wildfire through the valley. One of their own was under attack from city money, and folks had opinions about that. The smell of wet wool and tobacco filled the air as neighbors pressed in, leaving muddy boot prints on the plank floor. Judge Nathan Whitmore, young and fresh from law school back east, looked overwhelmed by the crowd. He'd arrived just 2 months ago, eager to bring proper legal procedures to the territories. Now he faced his first real test. "This hearing will proceed with order," he said, gavel cracking. "Any disruptions will result in removal." Edmund sat with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Cornelius Hatch, who'd come all the way from Helena. Across from them, Stone sat alone. He'd refused a lawyer. "I'll speak my own truth," he'd said. Nora took her place in the front row, hands folded tight in her lap. Behind her, she felt the solid presence of their community. Tom Pike and his wife, Dr. O'Rourke, the Hendersons, Elodie, even crusty old Samuel Briggs, who never came to town except for supplies. "Mr. Hatch," the judge began, "present your case." The lawyer stood, smooth as snake oil. "The law is clear, Your Honor. The Homestead Act requires continuous residence for 5 years. Mr. McRae abandoned his claim for 6 months in 1881. We have affidavits from 3 witnesses who will testify the property stood empty during that time." 3 men Nora didn't recognize took the stand one by one. Trappers, they claimed, who'd passed through the valley that year. "Cabin was empty," the first said. "No smoke from the chimney. Stock gone. Clear abandoned." "You're certain of the dates?" Hatch pressed. "Yes, sir. Remember clear because it was the year of the big flood. Spring of 81. Stone's jaw tightened. Nora knew what he was thinking. The flood had been in 82, not 81. But these men spoke with such confidence, their stories matching perfectly. Too perfectly. When the third finished, Hatch produced a stack of papers. "I also submit Mr. McRae's own testimony, given to Marshal Brady upon his return, stating he'd been gone near about 6 months tracking rustlers. His own words condemn him." Judge Whitmore studied the papers, frowning. "Mr. McRae, your response?" Stone stood slowly, his size making the small courtroom feel smaller. "Those men are lying." "That's a serious accusation," the judge warned. "It's a serious lie." Stone's voice was steady as granite. "The flood was in 82, not 81. Any man who lived in these parts would know that. These men never trapped this valley. They've been paid to say they did." "Can you prove that?" "I can prove I was serving the law when I left. That I was asked to go by Marshal Brady himself, deputized proper." He looked at the marshal, who nodded. "I can prove I left someone to tend my stock and watch my property." "Who?" "Samuel Briggs." A stir went through the crowd. Briggs stood, joints creaking. "That's right. Stayed in Stone's cabin near 2 weeks at a stretch, then went back to my place to check on things. Back and forth all season. Fed his stock, kept the fire going, even planted his garden that spring." "You'll swear to this?" the judge asked. "On my mother's grave, such as it is, she's buried out back of my place in a coffee tin." Dry laughter rippled through the crowd. "Point is, Stone never abandoned nothing. He served when called like a man should." "Anyone can claim anything," Hatch said smoothly. "Do you have proof? Written agreement? Payment records?" "Neighbors don't need papers between them," Briggs spat. "Word's good enough for honest folk." "The law requires more than word," Hatch said. "Then the law's an ass," someone called out, earning a crack of the gavel. Tom Pike stood. "Your Honor, I was there when Marshal Brady asked Stone to ride with us. Would have taken weeks with just the marshal and me. Stone's tracking skills saved lives." "Irrelevant," Hatch interrupted. "Good intentions don't override legal requirements." The hearing continued, each of Stone's neighbors standing to testify. Dr. O'Rourke confirmed treating Stone for a bullet wound earned during the pursuit. Reverend Pike testified to blessing the cabin before Stone left, praying for his safe return to it. Mrs. Henderson produced a ledger showing Stone's purchases throughout that time sent with Briggs, but Hatch had an answer for everything. Papers weren't filed. Procedures weren't followed. The letter of the law was clear. Nora watched it all with growing desperation. Truth was losing to technicality, community to cold law. She caught Edmund's eye once. He had the grace to look away. "If there's nothing further," Judge Whitmore began. "There is." A new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a man in a federal marshal's star, trail-dusty and hard-eyed. Behind him, 2 deputies held the arms of Hatch's 3 witnesses. "Deputy U.S. Marshal John Crandall," the man said, striding forward. "Sorry I'm late, Your Honor. Had to track down these gentlemen first." "Marshal, what's the meaning of this?" "Been following these 3 for weeks. They're part of a ring that's been working the territories. False witnesses for hire. They testify to whatever they're paid to testify to, help city men steal land from honest settlers." The courtroom erupted. Judge Whitmore pounded his gavel repeatedly before order was restored. "That's a serious charge, Marshal." "Yes, sir, and I've got the evidence to back it." He produced a leather portfolio. "Sworn statements from Helena, Bozeman, 3 other towns. Same men, same tactics. They study up just enough to sound credible, but they always make mistakes. Like not knowing when the big flood was." One of the witnesses broke. "He paid us." He pointed at Edmund. $500 to say we saw the empty cabin, gave us the dates, the details, everything." Edmund shot to his feet. "That's absurd." "Sit down, Mr. Vale," the judge commanded. "Marshal, do you have proof of this payment?" "Working on it, but I've got something better." Crandall smiled grimly. "Mr. Cornelius Hatch here isn't just any lawyer. He's wanted in Colorado for land fraud. Been helping Eastern money steal Western land for years." Hatch tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Tom Pike's fist dropped him cold. The courtroom erupted again, but this time with savage satisfaction. When order was finally restored, Judge Whitmore looked older, wiser. "Mr. McRae, please stand." Stone rose, Nora's hand finding his. "The court finds that you did not abandon your homestead. Service to law enforcement, especially when formally deputized, cannot be held against a man's claim. Moreover," he looked at Edmund with disgust, "this court finds evidence of attempted fraud, subornation of perjury, and conspiracy to deprive a citizen of lawful property." He turned to Marshal Crandall. "I'm issuing warrants for Edmund Vale and Cornelius Hatch. As for these 3, he indicated the false witnesses. They're yours, Marshal." "What about my claim?" Stone asked quietly. "Confirmed and protected. This court also orders Mr. Vale to pay all court costs and a fine of $1,000 for abuse of legal process." The gavel came down final. "This hearing is closed." The crowd exploded in cheers. Men pounded Stone's back. Women hugged Nora. Through it all, she watched Edmund being led away in irons, his city suit mud-splattered, his arrogance finally broken. He caught her eye as he passed. "I only wanted—" "You wanted to own me," she said quietly. "Like you wanted to own this land, but some things can't be bought." Outside, in the spring sunshine, their neighbors lingered, reluctant to end this moment of communal triumph. Justice had won, but more than that, their way of life had been validated. "Drinks are on me," Tom Pike announced, and a cheer went up. But Stone drew Nora aside. "Need to go home," he said quietly. "Need to see it's still ours." They drove back in silence, but it was a full silence, rich with relief. The cabin came into view just as the sun touched the mountain peaks, painting everything gold. "It's ours," Nora breathed. "No." Stone helped her down from the wagon, pulled her close. "It's home. There's a difference." That night they made love with desperate joy, claiming each other as they'd claimed their land, with fierce determination and tender promise. Later, lying in the darkness, Nora thought about Edmund in a jail cell, about laws written far away by men who'd never built anything with their own hands. "Stone, the cradle. I want to finish it tomorrow." He was quiet for a moment. "Still might stand empty. Or it might not. Either way, it should be ready. Hope should always be ready." He pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her hair. "Then we'll finish it. Together." Through the window, stars wheeled overhead. The same stars that had watched Stone build this cabin board by board, that had witnessed their vows, that would shine on whatever came next. The land was theirs by law now, but more importantly, it was theirs by right. The right of work and love and stubborn faith in tomorrow. The cradle would be finished. The garden would be planted. And maybe, God willing, their empty rooms would fill with voices other than their own. But tonight, this was enough. Justice served, home secured, and each other to hold against whatever storms might come. The mountain wind sang through the pines, and Nora fell asleep to its music. Stone's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, their future finally, truly, their own. 2 years later, the sound of small feet on wooden floors had become the music of the McRae household. Little Margaret, barely walking but determined to explore, toddled after her mother while Nora worked in the garden, the child's chubby hands grasping at anything within reach. "No, sweet pea, those are for eating, not throwing," Nora said, rescuing a tomato from her daughter's grip. The miracle of Margaret still took her breath away sometimes. After the trial, after Edmund's imprisonment for fraud, after life had settled back into its rhythms, Nora's body had finally decided to prove the doctors wrong. The pregnancy had been difficult, full of bed rest and worry, but Elodie had been there every step, her métis wisdom supplementing Dr. O'Rourke's modern medicine. Now here was Margaret, sturdy and laughing, with Stone's gray eyes and Nora's stubborn chin. The cradle that had waited so long finally served its purpose, though Margaret preferred to sleep tucked between her parents like a small, warm puppy. "She'll be climbing trees before we know it," Stone said from the porch, where he was adding another room to the cabin. Not for hope this time, but for certainty. Nora was carrying again, her belly round beneath her apron. "Don't encourage her," Nora laughed, but she was already imagining it. Children racing through the meadow, voices calling across the valley, the cabin full of life and noise and joy. The rocking chair Stone had made her that first winter sat in place of honor by the fireplace, the marriage quilt draped over its back. The quilt had grown over the years, new pieces added to mark occasions, a scrap from Margaret's blessing dress, cloth from the curtains of their new room, even a piece from the shirt Stone wore to the trial, transformed from memory of conflict into part of their shared story. "Letter came," Stone said, producing an envelope from his pocket. "From Boston." Nora's hands stilled on Margaret's hair. They'd had no word from that quarter since Edmund's sentencing, 18 months in prison and permanent disbarment from practicing law in any territory. But the handwriting wasn't Edmund's. The letter was from his sister, a woman Nora had met only once. "Dear Mrs. McRae," it read, "I thought you should know that Edmund was released last month. He is headed west, not to Montana, he assured me, but to California to start anew. He asked me to tell you he understands now what he tried to take from you. He says prison taught him the value of things that cannot be bought or stolen. Freedom, dignity, the right to build one's own life. I don't know if his words are sincere, but I felt you deserved to hear them. May you and your family prosper in the life you've chosen." Nora folded the letter carefully, then placed it in the fire. Some chapters needed to stay closed. "All well?" Stone asked. "All well. He's California's problem now." Stone's laugh rumbled across the garden. "Poor California." As if summoned by her father's laughter, Margaret tottered toward him, arms outstretched. He scooped her up, settling her on his shoulders where she could survey her kingdom, the garden where her mother grew vegetables and herbs, the barn where her father kept the horses, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in rainbow profusion. "The Pikes are coming for Sunday dinner," Nora reminded him, "and Dr. O'Rourke said he might stop by to check on me." "Getting crowded around here," Stone said, but his smile was warm. The isolated man who'd built a cabin for solitary dreams had discovered the joy of community, of shared meals and borrowed tools, and children who would grow up with ready-made aunts and uncles in every neighbor. That evening, as they sat for supper, Nora felt the new baby move, a flutter like bird wings, like hope taking flight. Margaret babbled in her high chair, more food on her face than in her mouth. Stone reached over to wipe her chin, his big hands impossibly gentle. "Been thinking about names," he said. "If it's a boy." "Not Stone Jr.," Nora said firmly. One man of granite in the family is enough. Thought maybe Samuel, after Briggs. Ornery cuss saved our home testifying like he did. Samuel McRae. Nora tested the sound. And if it's a girl, your mother's name, or maybe Faith. He covered her hand with his. Seems fitting, considering. Faith. Yes, that was what had brought them here. Faith in new beginnings, in second chances, in love that grew from partnership rather than passion. Faith that sometimes the thing that looked like an ending was really a beginning in disguise. Later, after Margaret was asleep in her cradle and the dishes were done, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains. The swing Stone had hung creaked gently as they rocked, Nora's head on his shoulder, his hand resting on her growing belly. "Ever miss it?" he asked. "Boston, the life you might have had." "How can I miss what I never really had?" She turned to look at him. "I had expectations, plans, dreams that belonged more to others than to me. Here, I have a life I built with my own hands, a husband who sees me as I am, not as he wishes I were. A daughter who will grow up knowing her worth isn't measured by her womb, but by her heart. How could I miss shadows when I have substance?" He kissed her then, soft and sure, tasting of coffee and promises kept. As stars began to prick the darkening sky, Nora pressed another wildflower into her Bible. Evening primrose, blooming bold despite the fading light. The book was thick with pressed flowers now, each marking a moment, a season, a small victory over doubt. "Papa, Mama!" Margaret's voice called from inside, wakeful and demanding. "I'll go," Stone said, but Nora was already rising. "We'll both go. She settles better with both of us." They went in together to soothe their daughter and bank the fire, to close the shutters against the night wind and prepare for another day of simple, profound joys. Behind them, the empty swing continued its gentle motion, pushed by mountain breeze that carried the scent of pine and possibility. In the barn, the milk cow lowed softly. In the garden, night-blooming flowers opened to the moon, and in the cabin that Stone had built for a family he'd only dreamed of, that family lived and grew and loved, proof that some mail-order brides and mountain men were meant to find each other across all the miles and mistakes that tried to keep them apart. The cradle by their bed rocked slightly in the air currents from the window, empty now but waiting, like the spare room Stone was building, like the dreams they still dared to dream, because that's what love did in the end. It made you brave enough to keep hoping, strong enough to keep building, wise enough to know that the family you chose could be just as precious as the one you were born to. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, teething babies and summer storms, crops to tend and meals to cook. But tonight, with her husband's arms around her and their daughter's soft breathing filling the darkness, Nora McRae knew she was exactly where she belonged. Not because she'd given Stone sons, but because together they'd built something better than either had dared imagine. A home where love was patient, hope was stubborn, and every soul who entered was family. The wind sang through the pines, eternal and comforting, carrying their story out across the valley where other dreamers might hear it and take heart. And in the morning, the sun would rise on their small corner of Montana, blessing the mail-order bride who thought no one wanted her, and the mountain man who'd asked not what she could do, but what she would try to build. Together, always together, until the mountains crumbled and the last star burned out, and even then, their love would remain, pressed like flowers in the pages of a life well lived. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps winding down before bed? Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and connections make our community richer.